Alright, so this time I'm solving a cubic over c. So we've got the equation z cubed plus 3z squared plus 8z minus 12 equals 0. Now, basically it's a two-step process. Trial and error to find your first factor or your first root. And then if you've got a factor, it becomes a quadratic. And we can solve that quadratic in any way that we feel that we want to solve it. So really the first step is trial and error. Remember, if you put values in for z, 1, 2, 3, -1, -2, -3, maybe 0, that'll give you your first factor. So I've trial and errored this already, and I know that if I put 1 in for z, that's going to equal 0. So just testing. Alright, so it looks like 1 is a root. That means that, therefore, z minus 1 is a factor. Alright, then we can work from there. So if we know that z minus 1 is a factor, that would mean that z minus 1 times the rest of it is equal to 0. Now you've just got to think about what the rest of it is. Now, to make a constant term of -12, it's going to be -1 times whatever the constant is here. So that's going to put a positive 12 in here. To make z times z cubed, we're going to need a z squared term here. And the middle bit's the one that's sort of tricky to figure out. Now, if I want to have an 8z, and I know that this times this is going to give me a 12z, then I need whatever this is in the middle here to give me a minus 4z when multiplied by this thing. So that's going to be, pretty sure it's going to be plus 4z. So let's check this out. 12z minus 4z, that's going to give me an 8z. Now, because of the way that because this is a factor, because I know this is a factor, if it works for that bit, it should also work for this bit. So, just double checking. Z squared times -1 is going to make -z squared, and 4z times z is going to make positive 4z, so it worked for that as well, 3z squared. But you only really need to test it against the linear term here. Alright, so now I've got a quadratic. Now I just need to solve the quadratic for 0, because this equals 0, this equals 0. So therefore, null factor law, z squared plus 4z plus 12 equals 0. I can solve this by completing the square. Z squared plus 4z, and then half of that, square it plus or minus, so that's plus 4 minus 4 plus 12 equals 0. This is going to be a perfect square. The rest of it's going to be plus 8. And we can work from there. Square root. Oh, that shouldn't be z squared, should it? It should just be z. Z plus 2. And we can work with this a little bit. Z, the -2 can come over here. It's going to be plus or minus the square root of 8i squared. Now we can just look at our square root. Now that's made of 4 times 2, so I can bring a 4 out, and that's going to be 2. The I squared can come out as I, and I end up with root 2 left over here. Alright, so now I know that z equals -2 plus or minus 2i root 2. I've got 2 answers to my equation. Well, I've got 3 answers. So z equals 1, or -2 plus or minus the square root of 2, plus or minus 2i root 2, or -2 minus 2i root 2. 3 answers. All right, that's solving a cubic function over C. A little bit of trial and error. Come up with your quadratic factor and then solve it using either the quadratic formula or completing the square.